Well, I've done quite a lot of adaptations, and it's usually the length. You know, how are you going to reduce 3, 4, however number of pages to an hour and a half's performance? But so it's finding out what the core plot is and deciding on what your emphasis is going to be. And then a lot of it falls away very evidently. You know, whole chapters you say, well, I don't need that chapter, I don't need this chapter, I don't need that page. It's sort of being decisive, I suppose, about what you can use. And then it's a process of squeezing. So, yes, mainly that. A lot of things were decided for us because it's written in the first person, so the point of view is always there. So that's a given. So it was sort of getting on with it and just getting it into shape. And then working with Jane to see what bits worked, whether some things were overwritten, some things he needed more text putting back. You know, it's a sort of, it evolves, that's all I can say. It sort of goes on and on until we stop. Yes, well, there was one very nice character relationship for the main woman, for Anna, with another woman, which was sort of important, but we held on to that for as long as we could, but it just took up too much time, and so that she had to be dropped. It's a great pity, yeah. I know Jane very well, and she knows me, and we've got a language, so it's quite a relaxed process, really. The main problem is trying to find the convention. What are the rules of this particular game? Whenever I do a production, the big decision for me, and the thing that most interests me, is what sort of world am I creating? What sort of stylistic world that is? Is it very naturalistic? Is it heightened? Are we talking to the audience? Are we not talking? What are the rules? And rehearsals are about finding the rules of the game. You know, are we playing cricket, or are we playing tennis, or are we playing soccer? You know, and if we're playing soccer, we can't play golf. Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of work. And the main problem with this is, in what way is Anna going to tell her story? Is she just going to tell us, or is she going to act it out for us? Is she going to bring back memories for us? Is she going to show us how she felt, or is she going to be objective? How physical is she going to be in her telling? Will she act out other characters, or will she just sketch them in or imply them? You know, it's those sort of questions, and those are the tricky ones. And it means Jane, as an actress, has to be incredibly flexible to find all these shifts of level. And then, do they cancel each other out if there are too many modes? And all you can do is keep working on them and trying them and exercising them. And then whatever you end up with, that's what you end up with. Yeah, I never have a sort of definite finished performance in mind or in view when I rehearse. You know, I have a sort of sense of what it might be and a sort of direction to go in, and then we just travel along that, and we might reach that sort of goal, we might go beyond it, or we might take a turning and go somewhere else. So I'm always very sort of resigned at the end of rehearsals, and that's it. That's what we did, that's what we got to. Yeah. You're really concentrating on the character's journey, but of course you've got to make it clear for the audience, otherwise there's no point in doing it. So you're always thinking, oh, do we need to give the audience more information here? Or maybe that's too much information. Or are we giving the information too soon? Or can we withhold things? Or if there's a time jump and then we go backwards again, is that going to be clear for the audience if we shift things chronologically, which happens a couple of times in the story? We've got to make sure that the audience can follow, because often I go to see theatre and I have no idea what's happened because the people working on it haven't been meticulous enough about. They've assumed, because they've understood the story, they haven't sort of thought beyond that a little bit. It's about being very specific all the time and saying, do we really need that? And it's interesting. We keep tightening and tightening all the time. Practically every time Jane does a little run through, we suddenly say, oh, we don't really need that now. We don't need that, because you're showing us. You don't have to tell us because we can see it. So it's a sort of compression that goes on. I'm very happy for people to come into rehearsal. I hate rehearsals being precious, you know, and also it's in this case because it's just one person performing. It's pretty unstimulating for Jane to have to talk to me every day. You know, face that's either yawning or looking annoyed or whatever I happen to be doing at the time. So it's good for people to come in. I mean, the only time when I'd say I don't want anybody in if the actor were feeling a little bit delicate or nervous or tired, then you don't want to expose them unreasonably. But it was interesting, our costume designer came in actually on the second day, and I said, do you want to hang around? Jane's going to try to go through it. You know, she'll improvise most of it. And Jane found it very helpful because there was somebody there. She felt there's a sense of focus. It's a very good question, and it's very difficult for me to be objective about it because obviously it evolves. I think I'm always doing the same thing, but in fact I'm not, because there are certain techniques or processes that have dropped by the wayside. They don't seem to be as serviceable as they used to be, and maybe my focus has changed. I was trained in America years ago when the famous method was, you know, at its height, and it was all about how you felt and working from the inside outside. And over the years, I've come to see more and more that actually it's equally strong, if not better and more truthful, to work often from the outside in, because the body contains all the feelings. And if the body is doing the right things, the other stuff will come. And that's sort of been proven by you know, scientists for exploring, you know, emotion now, and you know, and how the brain works. And you know, if you put your body in a certain position, you will automatically feel certain things because we're hardwired. We're certainly like to be angry, to be frightened. You know, if I breathe very deeply and I just let my nostrils flare, and there's a sort of a point in the back of your eyes that if you imagine you're looking from there and your nostrils flare and your mouth slightly open and you breathe, you actually can start to feel, without any reason to, can feel a sense of anger. It's extraordinary. Or if I make very shallow breathing, immediately I'll feel frightened, because when you're frightened, you know, so there's a way of accessing much more truthfully how you feel and how you think than going through what's the sort of, I suppose, more common way of the actor trying to feel something or trying to remember some, you know, equivalent experience in their past and going through a whole lot of trauma to try to reach these feelings, because it usually becomes very self-indulgent and it's not all that truthful anyway. You know, it's very interesting. You know, I found that very exciting. By moving and relating to things, it starts to bring up sensations and feelings and thoughts as well. So I suppose that's the biggest shift in my method of working. And I guess also I'm more confident with what I do now, so I can get to things more quickly, you know, which is good, I think. And also my eyes are sharper now. You know, I can see. You get used to looking at actors, and as I'm old now, I'm not frightened to say to somebody, that's not good, or that's not right, or I don't believe you, whereas, you know, a few years ago I'd be very hesitant about upsetting an actor. But, you know, as long as you're saying it truthfully to them and not critically, it's fine. Oh, yes. I mean, not so much in the latter half of my career, but when I was starting, before I was very clear about what I wanted, and also before I checked very much with actors about how they worked, I would often find I had somebody in the company who resisted everything, you know, and made things very, very difficult. So I've learned gradually when I meet actors to say, this is the way I work. I'm putting my cards on the table. I don't fix anything, nothing's set. You've got to be very open. You've got to be spontaneous. You can't do what you did yesterday because you did it yesterday. You've got to be truthful to what's happening now. Do you understand? And they say, yes, yes, because they want the job. And then you repeat it. You say, but do you understand? You see, and in that way, I haven't had problems.
Yeah.
Because I remember once an actor on the dress rehearsal of all times, we'd been working with our work and improvising, and I said, and of course, remember, keep it nice and open when we get to the first performance. He said, do you mean we're really not going to fix anything? I said, what do you think you've been doing for the last 5 or 6 weeks? It was extraordinary. Well, it's just the danger is it gets too comfortable. We can have too many cups of herbal tea and take too many breaks. You know what I mean? It's that's the danger, that we have to keep pushing each other. Because it's lovely to work with people because it saves a lot of time and agony. But you can also start to get a little bit too overconfident or complacent, shall we say, and that's a danger. Yeah. So sometimes you have to sort of shove each other a little bit, yeah? Well, it's because the material is very, very different. I mean, first of all, the Tin Ring was about a real person who was still alive, and it was her memoirs. So, and I'd never done anything like that before. So at the beginning, I was rather sort of a little bit precious about, it's a real person, and we mustn't take liberties and impose too much. And I tried to keep it very, very simple. It was in a way very untheatrical. This is much more, more dramatic in story. I mean, God knows, Zdenka, the woman who was in the camp, her life was very dramatic. But this is much more romanticized and fictionalized, and lots of extraordinary things happen one after the other. So it suggests that it can be heightened and be less naturalistic, so Jane can do more heightened physical stuff. So the body becomes extra expressive, and you suddenly find you're doing extraordinary gestures, which are truthful, but that you don't do every day of the week. Do you know what I mean? The body goes somewhere else. And so we're aiming a little bit for that, I think. Yes? And also because it's the audience, I presume, I don't suppose a lot of people will have read the novel. It's sort of what happened. Where's it going? I think it's very surprising, and it's very important that we keep that surprise in the thing as well. You've got an hour, a couple of hours. No, the process is the same whether I'm working with students in a drama school, or Jane, who I know, or strange actors, or people like Sheila, and Ian. But somehow you find you talk to each actor differently. There's a sense, I don't know, inside you, it's not even conscious or deliberate, that you find a very specific and individual language for each person, because you're trying to tune in, because they're all very different. You try to tune into their wavelength. So it's very much about having a sense of the individuality of the actor and what they want. Some people you can just be very simple with and say, oh, in this scene I want you to do that, and it's easy. Some people want to know why. You can say to some people, oh, I think just jump around in this scene and I know exactly what you mean. Do you know what I mean? It's finding a language. So but I do enjoy working with actors, but it's also giving them the freedom to explore so they don't feel locked. So they can always explore and bring me things. And working that way, the actors make choices that I never would have thought of. So if I'm working with, say, 10 actors, it's not just my imagination and choices, it's 11 people's, imaginations all blending together. It doesn't matter whose idea it is, as long as it's right for the show. It's very difficult to talk about acting. I know I always get embarrassed when I hear actors being interviewed and being asked how they work, because they say, oh, I feel it, and they go to a lot of generalization, because it's almost impossible to describe a subconscious experience, because it's subconscious. You can't put it into words. I know Jane very well, but I don't know how her imagination works. I don't know what happens to make her play a scene or move in a certain way at a certain moment. All I know is I've given her some input, and the output has been that, but what the process, I have no idea. Do you know? I don't know why I suddenly get an idea. You know, because what's fascinating is that, of course, most of our life is subconscious. You know, we think we're in control up here, but in fact, we're not. You know, emotions are totally, the subconscious is working all by itself. I mean, why do you wake up in the morning feeling a bit anxious, or feeling very relaxed, or feeling annoyed? Because overnight something's been going on while you're not conscious. And it's coming to the surface because it needs to be dealt with. And the tricky things with actors is asking them to make the subconscious tangible for the audience. You know, so it's a mysterious process. And, you know, and I suppose scientifically there's probably lots and lots of, you know, very accurate words, but I don't know them. Well, that's what you ideally try to do. Often you misjudge. But yes, it's trying to give the actors a space in which they can feel free to try things without having to feel they've got to succeed or be good. They have the right to fail. Yeah. At the same time, you have to keep pushing them as well. So you're also challenging them. It's a double thing. Because if you get too touchy-feely with actors and indulge them, that's no good at all. You've got to push them, you know, demand from them, but give them space. You know, and encourage them to dare, actually, to be playful, really, because acting, however serious the material is, it's really about playing. You know, I would say, you know, when you're acting, you're playing seriously, and you're being serious playfully. You know, because we're just making things up, aren't we? Really, you know, it's such a strange thing. You know, I often think, what a peculiar job to do. It's really weird. You know. When I was a kid, yes, I acted in school plays, but I don't think I was very good. And then when my voice broke, I got very self-conscious, and then I thought I want to write. And then finally I discovered this thing called directing, and that seemed to be the right job for me. But now, actually, when I'm working with actors, I think, why are they finding it so difficult? I could do that. I could act that. You know, so, yeah. Well, luckily, quite early on, when I was in my teens, sort of late teens, I was born and grew up in London, and I don't know why, because my parents had nothing to do with theatre. I went to the theatre a lot from the age of 12, and saw a lot of theatre, and I was very attracted to it. And the first thing was the actors. You know, and then the second thing was the plays, and I didn't realise there was a director. And then I got interested in movies and read a book on film theory, and it was all about directing. And suddenly a great bell rang, and I thought, oh, that's it. That's for me, yeah? So that's how it started. And then I went and trained, you know, in America. Went to Carnegie Mellon, which has a wonderful theatre department. You know, in 4 years of, you know, wonderfully equipped, you know, fantastic, and great teachers. And we sort of started our days at 8 o'clock in the morning and finished at sort of 12 o'clock at night. You know, it was amazing. You did all your academic stuff in the morning, then you did all your physical stuff in the afternoon, and then you stage managed and was scene changers and made costumes and assistant directed and acted. You had to do everything and wrote plays. It was a wonderful training. And unfortunately, there's nothing the equivalent in this country. You know, really very, you know, terrific. Oh, it's the live, this is a cliche, isn't it? It's the live experience. First of all, as an audience in the theatre, you can look at what you want to. Whereas when you're watching film or television or looking at a DVD, you can only see what you're shown. You know, so if I'm watching a film with a scene between two people, the camera might focus on one character and on the other. On the theatre, I can choose to look at the person who's not talking. You know, so I have more. I can create my own show more. Also, I think film implies that this is, because it's filmed, you sort of believe it has happened somewhere before. This was filmed in the past, and it's usually very realistic. Whereas in the theatre, it's never totally realistic because you're in the theatre, you're in a building, you're with an audience, and the actors are there, and so it stimulates the audience's imagination more. The audiences are more participatory and in a creative way when they're watching a play, I think. This is actually quite an important thing for me. I like to work with very little technical stuff, only what you absolutely need. And the less stuff there is on stage, the more the audience imagine from themselves. To give you a very quick example, years and years ago when I was doing all the storytelling adaptation, I did this 10-hour version of Dickens' Bleak House. And there was nothing on the stage except 6 folding chairs. And afterwards people said to me, oh, the lighting was fantastic. And I said, but it was just plain white light for the whole 10 hours. And they said, no, the gas lights and the firelight and the chandeliers and the candles and the shadows, which told me that that person had created those things for themselves. We'd given them a sort of little clue, little hints, and they'd taken that. And so each person is seeing the show through their own framework of their own experience, which is kind of wonderful. I'm totally besotted with Chekhov, and I've done a lot of his plays. Well, not a lot of his plays. I've done them a lot of times, and I think The Cherry Orchard is just a great play, and however many times I've done it, there's more and more and more and more to do. The Cherry Orchard and the Seagull, I think, are very much my favourite plays. He's so incredibly perceptive about people, and he's both very compassionate and also very critical, and he shows you people absolutely rounded. I can't think of many playwrights who show you a character with all their flaws and faults and abilities and virtues, So in a good Chekhov production, you have this complicated relationship with the character. You love them and you feel sorry for them and you get angry with them and they irritate you and you want them to shut up and then you cry. It's terrific. And he's great because he deals with people psychologically brilliantly. He works on several levels. He works absolutely psychologically, socially and politically, and also in a sort of heightened, sort of poetic, while we're all alive, philosophical level as well. So he's terrific, yeah. Well, totally, I suppose. Because it's all I do. So it's always sort of come first for me, and it's made me very I hope more and more understanding about people. It's made me more perceptive, made me think about, because you're dealing with plays with different subjects and different themes, it's expanding your knowledge of the world, because every show you do is another world, and you have to go and do the research on it, and you're working with different actors. It took me a long time to realize that working in the theatre, particularly as a director, you can't help but get to know about people, because you're working in a room with a group of people, and there's two lots of relationships going on. There's the relationships of the characters in the play, and there's also the relationship that's going on between the actors and you, and the actors and each other, and the stage managers. And so you're seeing a double lot of psychology, social psychology at work all the time. But you're absorbing this even without realizing it. You're picking up so much information. Well, what's he doing over there? Is she looking, is doing that? And he was annoyed by that. And did I say the wrong thing? And she looked, this is like a computer with all these things, very finely tuned computer that's picking up all this stuff all the time. And you get, and it's into you. So you have a huge, and you sort of take that out into life a little bit. It's very interesting. I live in London, and it's incredibly, how crowded it is. And when I'm walking around, I'm always looking at people, and I practically never see another pair of eyes. People going around, they're not looking at, they're absolutely absorbed with themselves, either with the computers, or they're looking in store windows, or they're walking like that. And instinctively I'm observing. Because I've often found in rehearsal, I'll say to somebody, it's like the sort of person who does such and such. And I think, where did that come from? It just, it's interesting, so there's a whole stuff, you're building up stuff. So I suppose it's made me hopefully more aware, more understanding, seeing that life is incredibly complicated and there are no simple answers and so on, really. The advice I think I would give is that you, and particularly now with the things that are happening currently in theatre about power and so forth, because you're given the name of director, it automatically endows you with authority and power. Yeah, and you must be aware of that and never exploit it. Because most of the actors will be wanting to please you, and then there'll be a small percentage who'll be challenging you because of that title. And the thing is to try to be as truthful and as real as you can be, and not perform being a director. A lot of people perform being directors. They're very jokey, or they're very earnest, or because they need that. And I think to be as relaxed as you possibly can be, and open, and try to create a very, as you mentioned earlier, it's a relaxed atmosphere to work in. And of course, as a director, you have to make the final choices, obviously, otherwise what are you there for? And you've got to be the person who gets the thing going and creates the parameters in which people work. But within that, you try to give people as much autonomy as you can. And particularly working in theatre with actors, after all, they've got to go on the stage and do it, not you. I mean, I can sit behind my desk in my chair and say, I want you to be very sexy now, please, or be very aggressive now, or be overwhelmed with grief. And bless them, the actors go and do it for you, and that's, you've got to appreciate that they're actually going through a sort of often very painful or very exposing process for you, rather than demanding, A lot of directors get terribly impatient, and it's because of their own fear, their own sense of inadequacy. Most directors are actually quite terrified of being found out that we're not any good, so you cover with a lot of bluff. I think it's realizing that you're not, that the title is dangerous.